Okay, hi everyone, this is SmithyQ, SmithyQ.com, and I'm back with another video analysis. This one, it's going to be a little bit different, I suppose. I haven't played much lately, and so we're going to look at what I consider my best game, or at the very least, my favorite game. But before we do that, we're going to look at one of Morphy's best games, because this has a very similar theme to what I'm about to share with you today. And so this is the famous game Paulson Morphy back in 1857, I believe. And here, White, Paulson, one of the best players of his day, played c3. With the idea, of course, that he wants to be able to play d4, kick the bishop out, develop his bishop, control the center, and absolutely everything. And if White could move again and play d4, he'd be perfect, he'd be better, it'd be amazing. However, Morphy was able to play queen d3. And this simple move completely paralyzes White. It's so hard for White to get out, because if he can't move this pawn, then his bishop can't come out. And it's really hard to move the queen anywhere. Right now we can see that the rook is controlling the squares, and the queen's controlling the squares, and is the queen any good on b3? Probably not. It's really hard for White to do anything. And we'll see that White tries to play b4, he tries to play a4, and he's trying to get action over here. But meanwhile, Black is able to develop in just perfect, beautiful, everything he wants to do. And this leads to Morphy's, one of his most famous combinations, where he starts with queen takes f3, then bishop g6, and then there's this long forced mating combination, which is just, it's beautiful, it's breathtaking. But the key point, what set everything up, what made White's life difficult, and what let Black do anything, was this idea of blockading here on d3 and basically stopping White from moving anything. And this exact I don't know where I first saw this idea. I must have been in one of the beginner books that I was reading at the time. And then years later, I was able to, in a very similar position, use a very similar idea. So let's look at that now. So this is my game. Let's actually back up. So I'm against an internet fellow named Tommy. This was 2013, right before I started taking chess seriously again, actually. So this game is doubly important. I played Black, so let's look at it from Black's perspective. And so I played the two knights defense. Knight f6, and then we get into everyone's favorite line, knight g5, d5, take. And then, of course, just about everyone knows the famous fried liver attack, in which Black is temporarily up a piece, but his king is on e6. And it's an unbalanced position, and in practice, especially at amateur level, White just wipes the floor with Black. And this is the line that most White players know. That is, many people who play this knight g5 idea, the only thing they really understand, or the only thing they're really prepared for, is knight takes and knight takes. If you can play something different, then often you're off at a huge advantage already. And that's what I do here. The main line is knight a5, which attacks the bishop, and it leads to a pawn sacrifice for Black, but we're going to kick this knight back. We can develop all of our pieces just about anywhere, and Black has good compensation for the pawn. But I chose a different line. And so after e takes, I chose my pet variation, b5, the Ulvestad variation. According to my records, I've played this 7 times. I've won all 7 games, and not once did White play the main move. If you've never seen this before, it looks absolutely insane. Even if you have seen it before, it looks crazy. Why the heck are we playing b5? Well, the idea is that if the bishop were to take the pawn, why not? We can then play queen takes d5. And now we're attacking the bishop, we're also attacking the pawn over here, we're maybe threatening to play e5, and then the queen attacks the knight. The queen is very well defended here, and after the logical move, knight c3, queen takes g2, we're in kind of a mess. The knight's attacked, the rook's attacked, and Black is already at least equal. Right? Very easy for White to mess up. If white doesn't take, maybe he takes this guy. Well, then we take this. And what's happened is that the position is wide open. Black has much easier development. He's temporarily down a pawn, but this pawn's very weak. And we have two bishops in a wide open position. Black is doing fantastic. Again, something like queen d5, threatening to take the pawn, is very, very possible. We can play h6, kick the knight back, play e4. And black just has really good play. After b5, there's only one move that challenges black. And it's the paradoxical bishop f1. Which is why, if you've never seen this before, you can see why it's so hard to find this move. What's the idea? There's a whole bunch of ideas, honestly. But the main thing is that now, if I were to play queen takes d5, which is the idea, after knight c3, we see that the bishop is protecting the pawn. So that way we can't play queen takes g2. This means the queen has to move somewhere. And there's not a nice real square for the queen. You know, maybe we go here. And now we can win the pawn. There's a pin. And white's doing very well. Now, I don't remember the main line after, it's been so long since I played this, bishop 1. I think it's something like knight takes d5, so where the queen's attacking the knight, and then the knight moves, and then knight d4, so the knight defends the pawn. And it's a mess. And the main line eventually has a knight sacrifice for black. And I think this line might be refuted. I don't play it anymore. But again, white needs to know this bishop f1 idea, and then all the complications for this opening. And most people don't. But anyway, this is not about this opening. This is about the game. And so my opponent, after b5, did not play the critical bishop f1. He played another logical move. He brought his bishop back to b3. And so now I move my knight in. I'm threatening the bishop. And this is pretty standard. He kicks my knight. Take, take. I win the pawn back. Take, take. And this is just about really where the game starts. And so if you look at this, the position is about, it's equalish. Black has two bishops on a wide open position. And so black is doing great in that respect. On the downside is that this b5 pawn would, well, be like to be anywhere else. It could become a problem. White can attack. We got a4, we've got knight a3, things like this. And the pawn could be a little bit loose. So, also, white has no real weaknesses in his position. So, the position is equal. I can't really complain. I completely solved my opening problems. It's also, I can develop much faster than white. And white has to be careful, because if white isn't careful, he gets in trouble. And white castles here. Which is, I don't want to say it's a losing move. It really isn't. But it makes his position extremely difficult. He probably needs to play either d3 or d4 immediately. Yes, it's true that d4 does give up an isolated pawn, so maybe that's not ideal. But after knight c3, we're attacking the knight. Okay. So it's going to be, after this, we're attacking the knight, we're attacking the pawn, and if we exchange, white doesn't have an isolated pawn anymore. But I'm pretty sure around here, at the very least, d3. Because what happens after he castles is I immediately play knight f4. And my idea is just like the Morphy game. Is I want to plump my knight right here and completely stop him from moving. And already he's in trouble. For instance, if he plays d4 now, where he's attacking my knight, well then after knight e2, king moves, I take, I've actually won a pawn. If he takes back, I take. And if he tries to pin my knight to my king, I've got d3, where I'm anchoring my knight on a very unpleasant square. I can always play bishop f4 later to fully secure the pawn, or c5, c4, and even if he does win the pawn back, it's going to take him a lot of time, and black's position is clearly superior. And if he doesn't play that, like he plays in the game, he plays rook e1, I'm able to jump into knight d3. And just look at the power of this knight. So for one, it's protecting the pawn. That's great. It's also hitting this bishop. And so if the bishop does, he's got to protect the bishop. But it's also going to be extremely hard to develop that bishop because he can't move this pawn. This pawn's in the way of his knight. His whole queenside is undeveloped, sorry. And then also this knight is an aggressive attacking piece because it's hitting f2. And I want to play bishop c5 really fast, and black's in trouble. And from this point forward, black is essentially playing with half of his army. And he's probably losing. It's not easy to win, right? You put in a computer against computer, black probably wins every time. Because black's position is so overwhelming. So of course I'm also attacking the rook. So he has to move the rook back. So he plays rook f1. I develop my bishop b7. He attacks my pawn, I defend my pawn. He plays knight c2. He's trying to maneuver around. He's trying to figure out the best he can. Maybe he can play knight e1 and challenge my knight. Maybe. So I play bishop e7. I'm getting ready to continue development. He moves his knight over, and now I castle. Now there's a threat. If he were to try and continue with knight e1, say, I could at the very least take his bishop, and then I'd win this pawn here. And so I'm up a pawn with a huge position. I have the two bishops. This knight can barely move. This knight is useless. I'm threatening this, and again, black is just dominating. So that's why white, he plays rook d1 to defend. Now this, again, is a correspondence game, as almost all my games were. And they still are up to this point. At this point, I had a great position. You can see that, right? I've got my huge knight. I've got two great bishops. My rook's on an open file. But now I've got, what do I do next? How do I further improve my position? And 2 points is that one, this was played, so in 2013, near the end of 2013. So again, just before I was getting back into chess. So A, I was rusty, and B, I wasn't as good as I was now. Just as a fact. And at this point, I spent several days trying to think of my next move. Because I couldn't think of a good move. I didn't... And my problem was that I was thinking in terms of moves. I was trying to find one move here. What do I play? So I'm looking at something like maybe I play e5. That's one move. But then, what does that do? I mean, all it's really doing is blocking my bishop. So now it's hitting a pawn. He'll play knight e3, and, well, this bishop is now useless. And what do I do next? And it was really hard for... I can't play f4. He's controlling it. What do I do? And there was no one move that was jumping out, right? Same thing, I could play, bishop c5, right? He can move the knight, or right, then he'll kick my knight out, and this guy's already defended, and what do I do? And I thought, and I thought, and I thought. And it was finally, my eureka moment was when, instead of thinking about individual moves, I switched. I had a paradigm shift, and what's my plan? What is the main idea in this position? And okay, so I've got two bishops, and the board's pretty open. I've got two rooks, but the rooks only have this one line. And as long as my knight's here, right, my rook is just staring at my own piece. If I had more open lines, like for example, if these pawns were just to disappear, his pawns, my pawns, I'll just color them, right? If they were just to disappear, white probably loses instantly. I'll just move my rooks over, my bishops can come with check, and he has one knight defending. He would just lose. And so if I could open lines, I would win. So that was now, that shifted my thought process. How do I open lines in this position? Can I open lines? And I came up with the move g5. Now, maybe this is really obvious to you. I shared this with a chess friend just a few months ago, actually. And he looked at the position for about 30 seconds and said, g5 looks really good. And I threw my hands up going, I spent 40 minutes trying to find this move across several days, and you see it in 30 seconds? Right? Unbelievable. But again, it's the thought process behind it. Sometimes even the simplest, maybe it was obvious to you, but sometimes these moves, the power is the thinking that you do behind it, how you justify it. You know, any random move can be good, but the follow-up, knowing what to do. And that idea of opening lines for the rooks, it just, all of a sudden I had a goal of what I need to do. Just throw those pawns up. He could even win a couple, it doesn't matter, because the open lines will win the game. And of course there's also immediate threat. I mean, I could play g4, and the knight has nowhere to go. What is he going to do? Let's see what he does. In the game, he plays king f1. So after g4, he's got a square for the knight. Okay. Now I play bishop c5. Because again, before, he had his knight on h3, protecting the pawn. That knight's not there anymore. He can't play rook f1, because his king's there. And that means he has to play knight e3, which is fine. It's the only move. But now, backing up, he can never play knight e1 to try and exchange my knight, because again, f2 would fall. And so by putting his knight e3, he's stopping one threat, but he's allowing my knight to stay there. Excellent. So now I just keep coming. I just keep going. f5, offering a pawn. And he can't take it. No, that'd be completely suicide. If you were to take, I can just throw a rook over to this file. If the knight moves, okay, let's like move it somewhere else, right? That's actually checkmate. And this shows how strong opening the lines are. I have rooks, I have bishops, open lines equals GG, basically. It's going to win. We can see that. In 3 moves, all of a sudden, I would have a potential checkmate if he takes the pawn. He can't take the pawn. What does he do? He plays b4 because he wants to try and get his bishop out, which makes a lot of sense, right? And again, this is just like what Paulson did against Morphy. But what's the bishop going to do? It can't go to b2, and if it goes to a3, it's staring at its own pawn. And so it makes more sense to play b3, maybe play a4, and see if you can try and get this, I guess you had to play a4, right? And then try and get bishop a3 in. Something along that lines. Or play rook b2, bishop, even move the bishop out, and then move the rook over, or something along these lines. Now, yes, is this pathetic? Completely. White is a terrible position, but that's the type of moves he needs to do. Because at least if his bishop is on this diagonal, he could think about playing c4 and bring it to life. Like, maybe. This is pie in the sky, but you gotta try something. By playing b4, you just have more pawns on dark squares. So, after b4, I just move my bishop back, then he plays f3, and you can see why he wants to do this, because after take, now his knight is back on a good square, but it's also completely suicide, because he's opening more lines for me. And again, open lines with rooks and bishops should be completely devastating, and it is. And now I just rush forward. f4, kicking the knight away. Where's the knight gonna go? Not many squares. It goes to f5. And now, of the move that I'd want to play, of course, is rook to g8, because now I have that new g file. We have the bishop, we have the rook sliding in. It's going to be absolutely great. But then after knight e7, he wins the exchange. Now it's funny, even this position might not be that bad, because I'm still attacking with my whole force. We've got e4 coming to kick his knight away. We're going to probably cash in here. He has very few pieces defending. I'm probably still okay. But why give up material when you don't have to? So instead of rook g8, I actually played rook to f8, forcing his knight to move. It moved, and now I could easily slide over the g-file. Instead, I'm a bit more accurate. I come in, bishop f2, hitting the knight. And now we can see that his whole defense is really hanging by a thread here. Because if this knight were to move, then this knight is hanging. And similarly, if this knight moves, then there's very little defense on this knight. And what happens is he plays knight g5. And okay, so at this point, I don't want to say this is the equivalent of resignation, but it's the equivalent of resignation. But there's really very little else that he can do. He plays knight g5, and now here I see a beautiful finish. And I'm quite proud of myself, as I calculated this entire line out from here. And so, wow. Again, correspondence game, so I could move the pieces around. So I don't know if you want to call that calculation, but this resulting position is one of the prettiest that I've ever produced in one of my games, which makes it so happy, right? Just like why this game stands out. So I play rook g8. And then after knight f7, he's attacking my rook with the idea of if I were to move my rook somewhere, he's going to move this guy. But you can, like, even this, right? Like, where's he going to move his knight? Okay, he's attacking my rook, and then he comes in here. And he's hanging on. I don't want that to happen. And so when he does that, I just take his knight. Bishop takes h4. He takes my rook. And now this final combination. And again, this should make perfect sense that black is winning, because we have 4 pieces in the attack, all aiming at his king, and he has no defenders. He literally has no one. So I don't care about his knight. No. So bishop takes g2. And already, he goes to e2. You know, if he goes to the other legal square, that's mate instantly. Okay. So he goes to e2. And then there's one more move I needed to find. And that was this. e4. It's now the pawns are on it as well. And so the pawns are cutting off absolutely everything. The bishops are jumping in. The rook wants to come to g2. Maybe bring this bishop to f3. Knight controls the squares. White has absolutely nothing. He tries to bring his knight out. And then, again, the prettiest finish of any game that I've ever played. f3. He goes to f1. Bishop f2. Look at that, completely sealing him off. And then in the game, my opponent, he was a good sport about it. He played rook e1, and that allowed me to play this, with is just an incredible final position. All my pieces are in the attack. It's just beautiful. Most of his pieces are on the back rank, and it's just... this is art. And again, this game, probably the best game I've ever played, at the very least in terms of the aesthetic, and it's without doubt my favorite game. All the games I played since, before, after, I've beaten higher rated opponents. My opponent was rated around just over 1700. And again, I was rusty, but I was 1800 before I'd given up chess at that point. It doesn't really matter, right? I had never played a more beautiful game. And at the same time, most of this had 2 ideas behind it. The very opening was inspired by Morphy. And we always say we want to play like Morphy, right? Usually that means, you know, we're sacrificing, or, well, yeah, usually it's sacrificing. And in this game, it was actually much more of that positional idea, of just stopping him from doing anything. And then later, it was right here, where, again, I spent better part of a week, 40 minutes, all told. You know, 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there, trying to find something. And it's when I switched from thinking, what's the one move I need to play, to what's the plan? What are the ideas in this position, that I was able to find g5. And then the rest of my moves, they came very, very easily. Like, just one after the other. I didn't have to think about playing g4 or bishop c5. I barely had to think about f5. I just had to go for it. Because if you know the ideas, you know what to do. And again, this has largely shaped and changed the way that I've looked at chess, the way I approach chess. I reference Igor Smirnov's courses a lot, especially in my writings, because they further, I started studying them soon after this game, and they further solidified this idea of, it's not just, you know, thinking about moves, but what are the ideas? Find the ideas, then go from there. You know, because if you can find the main ideas of these positions, okay, 2 bishops, 2 rooks, open lines, all of a sudden the moves come naturally. And again, it's completely changed the way I look at chess. And this was that first starting point of where I spent 40 minutes, I found the idea, and then I won the game. And so that's what I try and communicate in my videos, in my writings, is the main ideas of the position. Because again, if you can find them, or you know how to figure them out, chess starts making more sense. And you play better, and I've played the best chess of my life after this game, since really trying to do that. So that's it. And so I wanted to share that, and went a little bit longer than I thought, but that's okay. So again, this is, if not my best game, then my favorite game that I've played. So that's that. SmithyQ, SmithyQ.com. If you want to like and subscribe, that'd be fantastic. I love comments. Let me see that down below. If you have a favorite game that you've played, you want to share that, I would love to see them. I can even make some videos on some. I'm a little bit low on content right now, but maybe I'll keep digging into the vault and looking at some of my best games, just as a change of pace. Otherwise, that's that. So thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Bye for now.